When 24-year-old Chloe Anderson crawled through the collapsed roof of an abandoned barn she'd bought for $300, she expected to find rotting wood and maybe some old farming equipment. She never imagined she'd uncover a military secret so explosive it would bring the Air Force to her doorstep within 48 hours. Hidden behind a false ceiling in the Hayloft was a prototype aircraft that could have changed the entire course of World War II. Along with classified documents that proved some military missions were so secret they were completely erased from history. But before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The rusted padlock on the barn door gave way with a satisfying crack under Chloe's bolt cutters, sending flakes of orange metal cascading to the overgrown grass below. She pushed the heavy wooden door open, wincing as it scraped against the concrete floor with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the gaps in the weathered boards, illuminating a space that hadn't seen human activity in decades. Chloe Anderson had always been different from other girls her age in Millbrook, a farming town in rural Nebraska, where everyone knew everyone else's business. While her high school classmates were busy with makeup tutorials and dating drama, she spent her afternoons in her father's garage, learning to rebuild carburetors and diagnose engine problems by the sound they made. Her calloused hands and grease-stained fingernails earned her mockery from the popular crowd, who called her obsession with fixing broken machinery just another way she didn't fit in. "You're wasting your time with all that junk," her mother Linda had said countless times over family dinners. "No man wants a girl who can't keep her hands clean." But Chloe's father, Robert, a mechanic himself, saw something special in his daughter's natural ability to understand how things worked. He taught her that every broken machine was just a puzzle waiting to be solved, and that the satisfaction of bringing something back to life was worth more than anyone else's opinion. After her father's sudden heart attack 2 years earlier, Chloe inherited not just his garage, but also his philosophy about finding value in things others had given up on. She made a modest living fixing cars, farm equipment, and anything else the people of Millbrook needed repaired. Her reputation for honest work and fair prices had grown steadily, but she dreamed of something bigger than spending her life under the hood of pickup trucks and tractors. The barn she'd just purchased sat on 12 acres of land that had been in the Henderson family for 3 generations. Old Harold Henderson had died the previous winter, and his city-dwelling children wanted nothing more than to sell the property quickly and divide the proceeds. The farmhouse was in decent condition and would likely sell for a reasonable price, but the barn was a different story entirely. Half the roof had collapsed during a severe storm 5 years ago, and what remained looked ready to follow suit at the first strong wind. Most potential buyers took one look at the sagging structure and walked away, but Chloe saw something different. The barn's frame was built from massive oak beams that were probably worth more than the asking price if she could salvage them properly. The stone foundation looked solid despite decades of neglect, and she calculated that with some hard work and creative problem-solving, she could transform the space into a workshop that would be the envy of every mechanic in 3 counties. The Henderson children were so eager to be rid of the barn that they'd accepted her offer of $300 without negotiation, probably figuring they were lucky to get anything for what they considered a dangerous eyesore. The paperwork was simple enough, since they just wanted it gone, and within a week of first seeing the property, Chloe found herself holding the deed to 12 acres and 1 very broken barn. Standing in the dusty interior, she could see that the damage was less severe than it appeared from outside. The collapsed section was limited to about a third of the structure, and the main support beams were still sound. Ancient farming equipment sat scattered around the floor, like mechanical fossils, covered in decades of dust and bird droppings. An old John Deere tractor from the 1930s sat in one corner, its green paint faded to a dull gray-green, but its engine block intact. Chloe made a mental note to check if it might be salvageable once she dealt with the roof situation. The barn was larger than most she'd seen, with a hayloft that stretched across the entire upper level. A wooden ladder led up to the loft, though several rungs looked questionable. Chloe tested each step carefully as she climbed, not trusting wood that had been exposed to moisture and temperature changes for so many years. The ladder held her weight, creaking ominously, but not giving way. The hayloft was darker than the ground floor, with only a few small windows providing natural light. Decades of accumulated hay, straw, and debris covered the floor in a thick layer that muffled her footsteps. The collapsed section of roof had allowed rain and snow to enter, creating water stains on the wooden floors and walls. But despite the damage, Chloe could see the potential for additional storage space, or even a small living area, if she decided to make the barn her primary residence. She spent the rest of the afternoon taking measurements and making notes about what materials she would need to begin repairs. The roof would be her first priority since further weather damage would only make everything else more expensive to fix. She estimated that she could do most of the work herself over the course of several weekends, though she might need to hire help for the heaviest beams. That evening, Chloe sat in her small apartment above the garage she'd inherited, spreading her notes across the kitchen table and sketching rough plans for the barn renovation. She calculated costs for lumber, roofing materials, and hardware, trying to figure out how to complete the project without depleting her modest savings account. The work would be challenging, but she'd tackled difficult projects before and found that persistence and creativity could overcome most obstacles. The following Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear, perfect weather for outdoor work. Chloe loaded her truck with tools, safety equipment, and materials she'd picked up during the week. She'd decided to start by securing the damaged section of roof to prevent further collapse, then work on patching the holes before winter arrived. Setting up extension ladders against the barn's exterior wall, she climbed carefully to examine the roof damage up close. The storm that had caused the collapse had torn away several sheets of metal roofing and snapped two of the support rafters. Water damage was visible throughout the affected area, but the main structural beams appeared to be holding firm. She could work with this. Chloe spent the morning removing loose debris and damaged roofing material, loading everything into the bed of her truck to haul away later. The work was physically demanding, but she'd built up considerable strength over years of mechanical work. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she sorted salvageable materials from complete waste. By noon, she had cleared most of the damaged area and was ready to begin installing temporary supports for the new roofing. The sun had climbed high enough to shine directly through the gap in the roof, illuminating the hayloft below in ways the small windows never could. As she worked, something caught her eye that hadn't been visible in the dim light of her previous visit. The ceiling of the hayloft, visible now through the hole in the roof, didn't look quite right. Most barn ceilings were simply the underside of the roof rafters, but this one appeared to have been covered with boards, creating a false ceiling. More intriguingly, one section of boards looked different from the others, as if it had been removed and replaced at some point. Curiosity getting the better of her, Chloe climbed down from the roof and made her way back into the barn. The ladder to the hayloft seemed more precarious than before, so she took extra care testing each rung. In the improved lighting from the hole above, she could clearly see that someone had indeed installed a false ceiling across most of the loft area. The boards were old but not original to the barn, and they'd been painted white at some point, though the paint had yellowed and peeled with age. The section that had caught her attention from above was directly beneath where she'd been working on the roof. Standing on the hay-covered floor of the loft, she could see that several boards in this area had been cut and fitted back into place, but not quite perfectly. The gaps between these boards and their neighbors were wider than elsewhere, and the wood looked slightly different in color. Chloe retrieved a crowbar from her tool bag and carefully pried at the edge of one of the suspicious boards. It came away more easily than she'd expected, revealing a dark space beyond. The board was longer than it appeared, extending back into the hidden area above the false ceiling. She removed several more boards, creating an opening large enough to shine a flashlight through. The beam of light revealed a space between the false ceiling and the actual roof that was much larger than she'd anticipated. Instead of the few feet of clearance she'd expected, the hidden area appeared to extend back at least 10 feet and was tall enough for a person to stand upright. But more surprising than the size of the space was what it contained. Even in the limited light of her flashlight, Chloe could make out shapes that definitely didn't belong in a barn loft. What looked like metal framework extended back into the darkness, covered with canvas or fabric that had been carefully draped to protect whatever lay beneath. She could see the edges of what appeared to be wooden crates and metal containers, all arranged with a purposefulness that suggested they'd been placed there deliberately, rather than simply stored and forgotten. The opening she created was large enough to climb through, but Chloe hesitated. The space had obviously been sealed for a reason, and disturbing it felt somehow significant. But her curiosity about what someone had gone to such lengths to hide was stronger than her caution. She expanded the opening by removing several more boards, then carefully pulled herself up into the hidden compartment. The air inside was stale and dry, with an odd metallic smell she couldn't immediately identify. Her flashlight beam swept across the concealed area, revealing far more than she'd glimpsed from below. The metal framework she'd noticed was actually the wing of an aircraft, though unlike any plane she'd ever seen. The wing was swept back at a dramatic angle, and its surface was covered with small metal panels that had been precisely fitted together. Even under decades of dust, the craftsmanship was obviously exceptional. Moving deeper into the space, Chloe discovered that the wing was attached to a fuselage that had been partially disassembled for storage. The aircraft's body was sleek and streamlined, with a pointed nose that looked more like a rocket than the rounded propeller planes she was familiar with. There was no visible propeller at all, which confused her until she realized she was looking at some kind of jet aircraft, though she'd never heard of jets being built during the era this barn suggested. The wooden crates contained aircraft parts, wrapped in oiled cloth, each piece carefully labeled with numbers and letters in a neat, military-style script. She opened several crates and found engine components, electronic equipment, and instruments that looked far more advanced than anything she'd expect from decades-old technology. Some of the electronic devices contained components she didn't recognize, with markings in what appeared to be German. But the most intriguing discovery was a metal filing cabinet that had been placed in the far corner of the hidden space. The cabinet was locked, but the mechanism was old enough that Chloe's lockpicks, a skill she'd learned from her father for dealing with seized toolboxes, made quick work of it. Inside were dozens of manila folders containing documents, photographs, and technical drawings. The papers were in remarkable condition, protected from moisture and light by their metal container. The top folder was labeled Project Nighthawk Classified in red letters, with additional stamps indicating various levels of military security clearance. Inside were technical specifications for the aircraft she'd discovered, along with test flight reports and development notes dating from 1943 to 1945. As Chloe read through the documents by flashlight, an incredible story began to emerge. The aircraft hidden in the barn wasn't just any experimental plane, but a prototype jet fighter that had been developed in secret during World War II. According to the files, it had been designed by a German engineer named Klaus Richter, who had defected to the United States in 1942, bringing with him advanced jet propulsion technology that was years ahead of anything the Allies possessed. The prototype, designated XP-74 Nighthawk, had been built and tested at a classified facility in Nebraska, not far from where the barn now stood. Flight test reports indicated that the aircraft was capable of speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour and had demonstrated maneuverability that surpassed any existing fighter plane. If it had been put into production, it could have given Allied forces a decisive advantage in the air war against Germany and Japan. But something had gone wrong with the project. The later documents told a story of bureaucratic interference, security breaches, and ultimately, a decision to cancel the program and destroy all evidence of its existence. The final report, dated September 1945, just after the end of the war, ordered that all prototype aircraft, documentation, and research materials be destroyed to prevent the technology from falling into the wrong hands during the post-war reorganization of military assets. According to the files, the destruction had been carried out as ordered, with official reports confirming that all materials related to Project Nighthawk had been eliminated. But clearly, someone had decided to preserve at least one example of the revolutionary aircraft, along with enough documentation to prove its existence and capabilities. Mixed in with the technical documents were personal letters and journal entries that provided a more human perspective on the project. The writing belonged to General Harrison Blake, who had been in charge of overseeing the Nighthawk program. His letters to his wife revealed the frustration and heartbreak he felt as political considerations overrode military necessity. ultimately leading to the cancellation of what he believed could have saved thousands of Iranian Allied lives. In one particularly poignant entry, General Blake wrote, "History will never know how close we came to changing everything. The boys flying Mustangs and Thunderbolts are brave beyond measure, but they're fighting with yesterday's technology against an enemy that grows more desperate and more advanced each day. The Nighthawk could end this war in months rather than years. But the men in Washington are more concerned with post-war politics than winning the current conflict." End quote. The general's final entries told of his decision to preserve one complete aircraft and all supporting documentation, despite direct orders to destroy everything. He'd arranged for the prototype to be disassembled and hidden, hoping that someday the truth about the program would be revealed and the potential of the technology would be realized. His last letter to his wife, dated just days before the official destruction of the project, included a hand-drawn map showing the location where he'd hidden the aircraft. Chloe sat in the dusty darkness of the hidden compartment, surrounded by evidence of a military program that had been deliberately erased from history. The weight of the discovery was overwhelming. She held in her hands proof that the United States had developed jet fighter technology years before it was officially acknowledged, and that political decisions had prevented its use when it might have made a significant difference in the war. The technical specifications alone were incredible. The Nighthawk's swept-wing design and advanced jet propulsion system represented innovations that wouldn't appear in production aircraft for several more years. The electronic systems included early radar detection equipment and communication devices that were far ahead of their time. Even the aircraft's construction materials, including experimental alloys and composite structures, showed a level of advancement that seemed almost impossible for the 1940s. But beyond the historical significance, Chloe realized she was facing a personal dilemma of enormous proportions. The documents made clear that Project Nighthawk remained classified at the highest levels of government, and that unauthorized disclosure of information related to the program was still considered a serious crime. Decades after the war's end, simply possessing these materials could land her in federal prison, regardless of how she'd come to find them. At the same time, the story told by General Blake's letters and the technical documentation suggested that important historical truths had been suppressed for political reasons that might no longer be valid. The aircraft represented a significant advancement in aviation technology, and the engineering innovations it contained could still have value for modern aircraft development. The general had hidden the prototype specifically so that its existence would eventually be revealed, trusting that future generations would have the wisdom to handle the technology appropriately. Chloe spent the rest of the afternoon carefully examining the aircraft and documentation, taking photographs with her phone to record what she'd found. The prototype was more complete than she'd initially realized, with most major components present and many smaller parts stored in labeled containers. The aircraft's condition was remarkable considering its age, protected by the dry environment and careful wrapping that had preserved even delicate electronic components. As evening approached, Chloe carefully sealed the hidden compartment, replacing the boards that concealed the entrance. She needed time to think about what to do with her discovery, and leaving everything exactly as she'd found it seemed like the safest approach until she could develop a plan. The weight of the secret she now carried felt heavier than any engine block she'd ever lifted. That night, Chloe lay awake in her apartment, unable to stop thinking about the aircraft hidden in her barn. She'd stumbled onto what was potentially one of the most significant historical discoveries in decades, but she had no idea how to proceed. The responsible thing would be to contact the authorities and turn over everything she'd found, but the documents made clear that the government had been willing to destroy revolutionary technology for political reasons once before. Over the following days, Chloe found herself distracted from her regular work as she wrestled with the implications of her discovery. She researched everything she could find about aviation history during World War II, looking for any mention of advanced jet aircraft development in the United States. Most sources indicated that American jet technology had lagged behind German developments during the war, with the first successful American jets not appearing until after the conflict ended. But scattered references in technical journals and memoirs suggested that more advanced projects might have existed than were officially acknowledged. Several wartime engineers mentioned working on classified aircraft designs that never reached production, and a few veterans of the European Air War recalled encountering unidentified aircraft that performed ESC far better than any known Allied planes. The more she researched, the more convinced Chloe became that General Blake's account was accurate, and that Project Nighthawk represented a genuine historical secret that had been successfully concealed for decades. The question remained what to do with that knowledge. After a week of sleepless nights and constant worry, Chloe made a decision. She would document everything thoroughly, create multiple copies of all materials, and then contact a journalist who specialized in military history. If the story was going to come out, she wanted to ensure it was presented accurately and that the political circumstances that had led to the project's cancellation were properly explained. She chose Sarah Martinez, an investigative reporter for the Washington Herald, who had written extensively about classified military programs and government secrecy. Martinez had a reputation for handling sensitive stories responsibly, while ensuring that important truths weren't buried by bureaucratic convenience. If anyone could help navigate the complex legal and political issues surrounding Project Nighthawk, it would be someone with her experience and connections. Chloe's initial contact with Martinez was cautious and vague, mentioning only that she discovered historical documents related to a classified World War II aircraft program. But Martinez was intrigued enough to agree to a phone conversation, and when Chloe described the basic outline of what she'd found, the reporter's interest became intense. "You need to understand," Martinez told her, "that if what you're describing is real, you've stumbled onto one of the biggest military secrets of the 20th century. Jet technology development during World War II is still a sensitive subject because it involves, quote, captured German scientists and classified research that continued long after the war ended. If there really was an advanced American jet fighter program that was deliberately concealed, there are people in government who would do almost anything to keep that quiet." Martinez agreed to visit Nebraska to examine the evidence personally, but she warned Chloe that once the story became public, her life would change dramatically and permanently. Government agencies would investigate every aspect of her background, and she would likely face legal challenges that could consume years of her life and most of her financial resources. "Are you prepared for that?" Martinez asked. "Because once we open this door, there's no closing it again." Chloe thought about her quiet life in Millbrook, fixing cars and farm equipment while dreaming of something more meaningful. The discovery in the barn had already changed her perspective on what was possible and what was important. If General Blake had been willing to risk his career and reputation to preserve the truth about Project Nighthawk, she could hardly do less. "I'm ready," she told Martinez. "This story needs to be told." Martinez arrived in Millbrook 3 days later, bringing with her a team that included a photographer, a technical expert in aviation history, and a lawyer who specialized in national security issues. Chloe led them to the barn and showed them how to access the hidden compartment, watching their faces as they realized the scope and significance of what she'd discovered. The aviation expert, Dr. Michael Chen, from the Smithsonian Institution, spent hours examining the aircraft and documentation. His preliminary assessment confirmed that the prototype was genuine and that its technical specifications were consistent with advanced German jet technology from the 1940s. The construction quality and innovative design features supported the document's claims about the aircraft's revolutionary capabilities. "This is absolutely incredible," Dr. Chen told the group as they stood in the hidden compartment. "The swept-wing design alone represents innovations that didn't appear in production aircraft until the 1950s. If this plane had been built in quantity during the war, it would have completely changed the balance of air power in Europe and the Pacific." End quote. The lawyer, Rebecca Stone, was more cautious about the legal implications. She explained that while possessing the materials might not be explicitly illegal since Chloe had found them on her own property, revealing classified information could still result in serious charges. The safest approach would be to negotiate with government authorities before publishing anything, but that carried the risk that the story would be suppressed entirely. Martinez made the decision to proceed with the story, while simultaneously contacting military officials to inform them of the discovery. Her plan was to publish a preliminary report about the find, while offering to cooperate with any official investigation. This approach would make it difficult for authorities to simply confiscate everything and pretend the discovery had never happened. The story appeared on the front page of the Washington Herald on a Tuesday morning, with the headline, "World War II Jet Fighter Found Hidden in Nebraska Barn." Martinez's article carefully presented the facts, without revealing the exact location of the aircraft, or providing technical details that might compromise national security. But even the basic outline of the story was enough to create an immediate sensation. Within hours of the article's publication, Chloe's phone began ringing constantly with calls from reporters, historians, government officials, and curiosity seekers. She'd followed Martinez's advice and prepared a brief statement, but she quickly realized that nothing could have prepared her for the intensity of public interest in the story. By noon, news vans were parked along the road leading to her property, and reporters were attempting to access the barn despite her posted, "No trespassing" signs. The local sheriff called to inform her that federal agents were on their way and that she should avoid speaking to media until after she'd met with them. The federal agents arrived that afternoon in a convoy of black SUVs that looked like something from a movie. The lead agent, Special Agent Gomes Rodriguez, from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, was polite but firm in explaining that the aircraft and all associated materials would need to be secured immediately while the government determined how to proceed. "We're not accusing you of any wrongdoing," Rodriguez assured Chloe as they stood outside the barn, "but you've discovered materials that remain classified at the highest levels, and we have a responsibility to protect national security information. We'll work with you to resolve this situation, but we need to secure the site first." Chloe watched as teams of specialists carefully removed the aircraft components and documentation from the hidden compartment, cataloging everything with military precision. She'd expected this moment ever since making her discovery public, but seeing decades of carefully preserved history disappear into government trucks still felt like a loss. Dr. Chen and the other experts Martinez had brought were allowed to observe the removal process and take additional photographs, but it was clear that official control of the materials had been established. Whatever happened next would be determined by government officials, rather than the people who had worked to bring the story to light. Over the following weeks, Chloe found herself at the center of a media storm unlike anything Millbrook had ever experienced. Her small town was invaded by reporters, government investigators, aviation enthusiasts, and conspiracy theorists, all drawn by the story of the hidden aircraft. The mayor called an emergency town meeting to address the disruption to local life, and many residents blamed Chloe for bringing unwanted attention to their quiet community. But there was support as well. Veterans organizations praised her for revealing an important piece of military history, and aviation museums expressed interest in displaying the aircraft if it was eventually declassified. Letters arrived from around the world, including several from elderly veterans who claimed to have encountered mysterious high-performance aircraft during the war years. Most surprisingly, Chloe received a letter from Margaret Blake, the 93-year-old widow of General Harrison Blake. Mrs. Blake had seen the news coverage and recognized her husband's handwriting in the photographs of documents that had been released to the media. Her letter explained that the general had told her about hiding the aircraft shortly before his death in 1978, but she'd never been able to find any trace of where he'd concealed it. Harrison always believed that someday the truth about Project Nighthawk would come to light, Mrs. Blake wrote. He said the American people deserved to know about the innovations their tax dollars had funded and the political decisions that had prevented those innovations from being used to save lives. I think he would be proud that a young woman with such courage and integrity was the one to finally reveal his secret." End quote. The government's investigation into Project Nighthawk took several months, during which Chloe was repeatedly interviewed by various agencies and experts. She cooperated fully, providing detailed accounts of how she'd discovered the hidden compartment and what she'd found inside. Her story never changed, and investigators eventually concluded that she'd stumbled onto the materials entirely by accident. The official report, released 6 months after Chloe's discovery, confirmed most of the details contained in General Blake's documentation. Project Nighthawk had indeed been a real military program that developed advanced jet fighter technology during World War II. The decision to cancel the program had been based on legitimate concerns about post-war security and the integration of German technology into American military systems. However, the report also acknowledged that the cancellation had been premature, and that the technology could have provided significant advantages if it had been implemented during the war. The general's decision to preserve one aircraft and supporting documentation, while technically insubordinate, had been motivated by genuine concern for historical accuracy and technological preservation. Most importantly for Chloe, the report concluded that her discovery and subsequent disclosure had been handled responsibly and that no charges would be filed against her or anyone else involved in bringing the story to light. The aircraft and documentation would be transferred to the Smithsonian Institution for research and eventual public display. The resolution of the legal issues opened the door for more detailed coverage of the story. Martinez wrote a book about Project Nighthawk that became a bestseller, and Dr. Chen published technical papers about the aircraft's innovative design that influenced modern aviation research. Chloe found herself in demand as a speaker at conferences and events, sharing the story of her discovery and the lessons it taught about the importance of preserving historical truth. But perhaps the most significant change in Chloe's life came from an unexpected source. The publicity surrounding her discovery had caught the attention of several aerospace companies that were impressed by her technical knowledge and problem-solving abilities. She received job offers from firms working on advanced aircraft development, opportunities that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. After much consideration, Chloe accepted a position with Horizon Aerospace, a company specializing in experimental aircraft design. Her role would involve reverse engineering historical aircraft to understand forgotten innovations that might have modern applications. It was work that combined her love of fixing things with the historical research skills she'd developed while investigating Project Nighthawk. The barn that had started everything was eventually converted into a museum dedicated to telling the story of Project Nighthawk and other classified military programs. Chloe worked with local historians and government officials to create displays that explained the historical context of advanced weapons development during World War II. The museum became a popular destination for aviation enthusiasts and history buffs, bringing tourist revenue to Millbrook that more than compensated for the disruption caused by the initial discovery. On the first anniversary of finding the hidden aircraft, Chloe stood in the barn that had changed her life so dramatically. The space that had once concealed one of military aviation's greatest secrets now welcomed thousands of visitors each year, educating them about the complex relationships between technology, politics, and historical truth. The renovation work she'd originally planned for the barn had been completed, but not in the way she'd envisioned. Instead of a private workshop, the building had become a public monument to the importance of preserving history and the courage required to reveal inconvenient truths. The 12 acres she'd purchased for the barn had become the foundation for a career and a mission that extended far beyond fixing engines and farm equipment. As she walked through the museum displays, Chloe reflected on the chain of events that had begun with a simple desire to find value in something others considered worthless. The collapsed barn had indeed contained treasure, but not the salvageable lumber and stone she'd originally sought. Instead, she'd found proof that history was more complex and more interesting than official accounts suggested, and that ordinary people could play extraordinary roles in revealing important truths. The story of Chloe Anderson and Project Nighthawk became a reminder that significant discoveries could happen anywhere, made by anyone willing to look beyond surface appearances and ask difficult questions. Her $300 investment in a broken-down barn had yielded returns that couldn't be measured in money, but in the satisfaction of knowing that an important piece of history had been preserved and shared with the world. The Nighthawk prototype itself eventually went on permanent display at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, where millions of visitors could see the revolutionary aircraft that might have changed the course of World War II. A plaque near the display told the story of its discovery and preservation, mentioning the young mechanic from Nebraska who had refused to let sleeping secrets lie undisturbed. But for Chloe, the most rewarding aspect of the entire experience was the knowledge that she'd honored the trust placed in her by General Blake so many decades earlier. His decision to preserve the truth about Project Nighthawk had finally been vindicated, and his faith that future generations would handle the responsibility wisely had been justified. The girl who had once been mocked for her obsession with fixing broken things had discovered that sometimes the most important repairs involved mending the gaps in historical memory. Her story proved that curiosity, courage, and persistence could uncover truths that powerful people preferred to keep hidden, and that ordinary individuals could make extraordinary contributions to human knowledge and understanding. In the end, Chloe's $300 barn had yielded the most valuable discovery of her lifetime, but not because of any monetary worth. She'd found something far more precious than gold or silver buried in that hidden compartment. She'd found proof that the past was full of untold stories waiting for the right person to bring them to light. And in sharing that discovery with the world, she'd ensured that the sacrifices and innovations of previous generations would not be forgotten, but would continue to inspire and inform future achievements in aviation and beyond. But the story of Project Nighthawk was far from over. 3 years after her initial discovery, Chloe received an unexpected phone call that would once again turn her world upside down. The caller introduced himself as Dr. Viktor Petrov, a retired aerospace engineer from Russia who had been following the Nighthawk story in international media. His heavily accented English carried an urgency that immediately caught Chloe's attention. "Miss Anderson," Petrov said, "I have been waiting many years to contact someone like you. What you found in that barn, it was not the only one. There were others, and I know where they are hidden." Petrov explained that he had worked for the Soviet aerospace program during the Cold War, specializing in analyzing captured American and German aircraft technology. In 1962, his research team had been given access to intelligence reports suggesting that the Americans had successfully hidden several advanced aircraft prototypes at the end of World War II, including additional examples of the jet fighter now known as the Nighthawk. "Your government was not the only one to make difficult decisions about advanced technology," Petrov continued. "My country also captured German scientists, and we learned that Klaus Richter, the designer of your Nighthawk, had built multiple prototypes before defecting to America. We spent decades searching for them, but could never locate the hiding places." The Russian engineer's story was compelling, but hard to verify. He claimed to have documents and photographs that proved the existence of at least 3 additional Nighthawk prototypes, along with other experimental aircraft that had been concealed across the American Midwest. More importantly, he said he had recently obtained information about their locations through contacts in the former East German intelligence service. "I am old man now," Petrov said, "and the Cold War is history. These aircraft belong in museums, not hidden in the ground where they help no one. I wish to meet with you and share what I know, but it must be done carefully. There are people in both our countries who would prefer these secrets remain buried." End quote. Chloe was skeptical but intrigued. The success of the Nighthawk discovery had made her something of an expert on hidden military aircraft, and she'd learned to be cautious about claims that seemed too extraordinary to believe. But Petrov's knowledge of technical details that hadn't been publicly released suggested he had access to legitimate intelligence information. She arranged to meet with Petrov at a hotel in Denver, bringing along Martinez and Dr. Chen for additional expertise and witnesses. The Russian engineer proved to be a thin, elderly man, with sharp eyes and precise movements that suggested a lifetime of working with delicate machinery. He carried with him a leather briefcase containing documents that immediately captured everyone's attention. The files Petrov showed them were photocopies of Soviet intelligence reports dating from the 1950s through the 1970s. The documents were in Russian, but Petrov translated the key sections, revealing a systematic effort by Soviet agents to locate and retrieve advanced American aircraft technology. The reports included detailed maps, aerial photographs, and even ground surveillance data from locations across Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado. "Your General Blake was a clever man," Petrov said as he spread maps across the hotel room table. "He did not hide just one aircraft. He created a network of storage sites, each containing different parts of advanced aircraft programs. Soviet Union knew this, but could never find them all." According to the Soviet documents, intelligence analysts had identified at least 6 locations where General Blake might have concealed aircraft or related materials. The barn where Chloe had made her discovery was marked on their maps, but so were several other sites, including an abandoned missile silo in Kansas, a defunct mining operation in Colorado, and a closed military training facility in Oklahoma. The most intriguing location was a ranch in Wyoming that had been purchased by a shell company with apparent connections to General Blake in 1946. Soviet surveillance reports from the 1960s indicated unusual activity at the property, including the arrival of large trucks and construction equipment, followed by efforts to conceal any evidence of what had been built there. "We sent agents to investigate," Petrov explained. "But American security was too good. They never could get close enough to confirm what was hidden there. But recent information suggests that whatever General Blake concealed in Wyoming was much larger than single aircraft." Dr. Chen studied the Soviet documents with growing excitement. The intelligence reports contained technical sketches and performance data that matched classified American research from the 1940s, suggesting the information was genuine. More importantly, the documents described aircraft designs that were even more advanced than the Nighthawk, including experimental bombers and transport planes that incorporated revolutionary propulsion systems. "If these reports are accurate," Dr. Chen said, "we're looking at evidence of an entire hidden fleet of experimental aircraft. General Blake wasn't just preserving one prototype, he was creating a secret museum of advanced aviation technology." Martinez was already calculating the implications of such a discovery. If additional aircraft were found, it would prove that the military's suppression of advanced technology had been even more extensive than the Nighthawk case had revealed. The story would be enormous, potentially forcing a complete reevaluation of American military history and technology development. But pursuing Petrov's leads would require significant resources and careful coordination with government authorities. The Nighthawk discovery had established protocols for handling such finds, but searching multiple locations across several states would be a much more complex undertaking. There was also the question of whether current military officials would cooperate with an investigation based on Soviet intelligence reports. Chloe found herself once again facing a decision that could fundamentally change her life. Her position with Horizon Aerospace had provided financial security and professional satisfaction, but the possibility of uncovering additional hidden aircraft was impossible to ignore. The Nighthawk discovery had given her a sense of purpose that went beyond personal success, and the thought of leaving important history buried seemed wrong. After extensive discussions with Martinez, Dr. Chen, and the legal team that had handled the Nighthawk case, Chloe decided to pursue Petrov's information. They would start with the Wyoming ranch, since it seemed to offer the best potential for a significant discovery while being the most accessible of the identified locations. The Wyoming property turned out to be a sprawling cattle ranch that had been in the same family for 3 generations. The current owners, the Morrison family, were unaware of any connection to General Blake or hidden aircraft, but they were willing to allow limited archaeological investigation in exchange for a share of any craft discovery's historical value. Ground-penetrating radar surveys of the ranch identified several areas with subsurface anomalies that suggested artificial structures. The largest anomaly was located in a remote valley about 2 miles from the main ranch house, hidden from casual observation by rolling hills and scattered trees. The radar signatures indicated a complex of underground chambers that was much larger than anything that could have concealed a single aircraft. Excavation began in early spring, with teams of archaeologists and aviation experts working under tight security to prevent media attention until they understood what they were uncovering. The first breakthrough came after 2 weeks of careful digging, when workers uncovered the entrance to a concrete bunker that had been buried under several feet of soil and carefully camouflaged. The bunker's entrance was sealed with a massive steel door that bore General Blake's personal military seal, along with warnings in multiple languages about the classified nature of the contents. Inside, the team found not just aircraft, but an entire underground facility that had been designed to preserve advanced military technology indefinitely. The main chamber contained 3 complete aircraft that were unlike anything in aviation museums. The largest was a 6-engine bomber, with swept wings and a sleek fuselage that looked more like a spacecraft than a conventional aircraft. Technical markings identified it as the XBF-55 Prometheus, an experimental long-range bomber that, according to hidden documents, had been capable of carrying nuclear weapons across intercontinental distances at speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour. The second aircraft was a transport plane designated XC-120 Atlas that appeared to have been designed for carrying heavy cargo or large numbers of troops. Its unusual configuration included multiple jet engines mounted above the fuselage and landing gear that could be retracted into the wings. Documents found with the aircraft indicated it had been tested for both civilian and military applications, with potential uses ranging from emergency disaster relief to covert military operations. But the most remarkable discovery was the third aircraft, a sleek fighter bomber that looked decades ahead of its time. The XF-91, Phoenix Incorporated design, features that wouldn't appear in production aircraft until the 1960s, including variable sweep wings, advanced radar systems, and electronic chimere countermeasures that could jam enemy communications. Test flight reports indicated the aircraft could perform roles ranging from air superiority fighting to precision ground attack missions. Beyond the aircraft themselves, the underground facility contained workshops, parts storage areas, and technical libraries that preserved the complete development history of General Blake's secret aircraft programs. The team discovered that Blake had not been acting alone, but had coordinated with a network of scientists, engineers, and military officers who believed that advanced technology should be preserved regardless of political decisions. The facility's workshops contained partially assembled aircraft and experimental engines that suggested Blake's team had continued developing new technology even after the official cancellation of programs like Nighthawk. Some of the experimental engines used propulsion concepts that were still being researched by modern aerospace companies, indicating that Blake's engineers had been working decades ahead of their time. Dr. Chen spent weeks examining the technical documentation found in the facility, discovering innovations that could have transformed both military and civilian aviation if they had been implemented during the 1940s and 50s. Advanced materials, electronic systems, and aerodynamic designs found in Blake's archives contain solutions to problems that modern engineers were still trying to solve. This isn't just a historical discovery, Dr. Chen explained to the excavation team. Some of these designs are so advanced that they could inform current aircraft development programs. General Blake and his team weren't just preserving the past, they were working on the future. The revelation that Blake had operated an entire clandestine aircraft development program for years after the war's end added new dimensions to the historical significance of the discoveries. It suggested that suppression of advanced military technology had been even more extensive than previously understood, and that innovative solutions to technical challenges had been deliberately concealed from both military leaders and civilian researchers who could have benefited from them. News of the Wyoming discovery created even more intense media attention than the original Nighthawk find. The existence of an entire underground aircraft facility suggested a level of military secrecy that conspiracy theorists had long suspected but never been able to prove. Government officials found themselves under pressure to explain how such an extensive covert operation had remained hidden for decades. The official investigation into the Wyoming facility took nearly a year, during which time Chloe worked closely with federal investigators to document every aspect of what had been found. Her role had evolved from accidental discoverer to recognized expert on hidden military technology, and government agencies began consulting with her on other cases involving potentially concealed aircraft, or weapon systems. The investigation revealed that General Blake had used his position and connections to quietly acquire surplus military equipment, recruit talented engineers who had been displaced by program cancellations, and establish research facilities that operated outside normal military oversight. His network had included former German scientists, displaced American researchers, and even some Soviet defectors who had brought advanced technology from their home countries. Blake's operation had been funded through a combination of personal resources, contributions from wealthy supporters who believed in preserving technological innovations, and profits from patents on civilian applications of military technology. The general had been careful to avoid any illegal activities, but he had definitely operated in ethical gray areas that would have ended his military career if discovered. More importantly, the investigation confirmed that Blake's motivations had been genuinely patriotic, rather than treasonous. His preserved aircraft and documentation showed consistent efforts to develop technology that could benefit American military and civilian aviation. His decision to conceal the technology had been based on disagreements with political decisions, rather than any desire to harm national security. The Wyoming facility yielded insights into several other hidden locations that Blake's network had used for storing aircraft and equipment. Over the following 2 years, additional excavations uncovered aircraft parts, technical documentation, and research facilities in Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico. Each discovery added new pieces to the puzzle of advanced military technology that had been developed but never implemented during the crucial years following World War II. Chloe found herself traveling constantly as investigations continued across the American West. Her expertise in interpreting Blake's documentation methods and understanding his network's operational procedures made her invaluable to recovery efforts. She developed techniques for locating hidden caches based on patterns in Blake's personal writings and military records. The cumulative discoveries fundamentally changed historical understanding of American aviation development during the early Cold War period. Textbooks were rewritten to acknowledge that advanced jet aircraft technology had been available years earlier than previously thought, and that political rather than technical factors had delayed its implementation. Military historians began reevaluating strategic decisions from the 1940s and 50s in light of technology that had been available but unused. Museums around the world competed for opportunities to display the recovered aircraft, which represented the most significant aviation discoveries in decades. The Smithsonian created an entire new wing dedicated to Blake's aircraft, while international museums developed traveling exhibitions that brought the story to audiences across Europe and Asia. The aircraft became symbols of innovation suppressed by bureaucracy, inspiring new discussions about the relationship between politics and technological progress. But the most profound impact was on modern aircraft development. Several aerospace companies obtained licenses to study Blake's designs and technical innovations, leading to breakthroughs in materials science, engine design, and electronic systems. Technologies that Blake's team had developed in the 1940s began appearing in contemporary aircraft, proving that innovative solutions to technical challenges could remain relevant across decades of SI. Technological change. Chloe's role in these discoveries led to offers from major aerospace companies and government agencies, but she chose to establish her own consulting firm, specializing in historical technology recovery and analysis. Her company, Blake Legacy Research, worked with organizations around the world to locate and study concealed or forgotten technological innovations that could inform modern development efforts. The work took her from abandoned Soviet research facilities in Siberia to hidden Nazi laboratories in South America, always searching for technological innovations that had been lost to political upheaval, military secrecy, or simple neglect. She developed a reputation for being able to find valuable information in the most unlikely places, following leads that others dismissed as impossible or impractical. Each discovery reinforced her belief that human innovation was more resilient and more widespread than official history suggested. Brilliant engineers and scientists had worked in secret laboratories, hidden workshops, and concealed facilities around the world, developing solutions to technical challenges that their governments or corporations had deemed too sensitive, too expensive, or too politically dangerous to pursue openly. The Blake aircraft discoveries also sparked international cooperation in studying hidden military technology from the World War II era. Former enemies began sharing intelligence archives and collaborating on recovery efforts, recognizing that preserving technological history served everyone's interests. Russian, German, American, and British researchers worked together to piece together the full story of advanced aircraft development during the 1940s, revealing a complex web of innovation, espionage, and despionage. Political suppression. 5 years after her initial discovery in the Nebraska barn, Chloe stood before the newly opened Blake Aviation Museum in Wyoming, built on the site where she had uncovered the underground aircraft facility. The museum displayed not only the recovered aircraft, but also the complete story of General Blake's network and the political decisions that had led to the concealment of advanced technology. Visitors to the museum could walk through recreated workshops, examine original technical drawings, and even sit in the cockpits of aircraft that had been decades ahead of their time. Interactive displays explained how Blake's innovations had influenced modern aircraft design and highlighted the importance of preserving technological knowledge for future generations. The museum's centerpiece was the original Nighthawk prototype, displayed alongside the more advanced aircraft found in Wyoming. A timeline showed how Blake's designs had evolved over the years, demonstrating the continuous innovation that had occurred even after official programs were canceled. Visitors could trace the development of jet propulsion, swept-wing aerodynamics, and advanced electronics through the progression of aircraft that Blake's team had created. Chloe had been invited to speak at the museum's opening ceremony, addressing an audience that included government officials, aviation historians, and representatives from aerospace companies around the world. Her speech focused on the lessons that could be learned from Blake's story and the importance of ensuring that future innovations would not be lost to political convenience or bureaucratic timidity. General Blake and his team understood something that we sometimes forget, Chloe told the audience. Innovation doesn't stop just because politicians or bureaucrats decide it's inconvenient. Creative people will continue to push the boundaries of what's possible, even if they have to work in secret. Our responsibility is to create systems that support innovation rather than suppressing it." End quote. The success of the Blake discoveries had also inspired other people to search for hidden technological treasures in their own communities. Reports began arriving from around the world of people finding concealed aircraft parts, technical documents, and even complete vehicles that had been hidden during various conflicts. Chloe's consulting firm was kept busy evaluating these discoveries and helping determine their historical significance. Not all of these discoveries were as significant as Blake's aircraft, but many provided valuable insights into local history and technological development. A farmer in France found buried aircraft engines from World War I. A construction crew in Japan uncovered experimental submarine components from World War II. And a homeowner in England discovered a cache of jet engine research from the 1950s hidden in their basement. Each discovery added pieces to the puzzle of technological history, revealing that innovation had occurred in more places and at more times than official records suggested. The cumulative effect was a more complete understanding of how human creativity had responded to the challenges of war, competition, and resource constraints throughout the 20th century. Chloe's success had also changed her hometown of Millbrook, which had embraced its connection to the Blake discoveries and developed a thriving tourism industry based on aviation history. The original barn had been expanded into a research center that attracted scholars from around the world, while local businesses benefited from visitors who came to see where the Nighthawk had been discovered. The town's transformation from a quiet farming community to an international destination for aviation enthusiasts had been dramatic but positive. Young people who might have left for opportunities in larger cities found meaningful work in the museums, research facilities, and supporting businesses that had grown up around the Blake legacy. Millbrook had become a symbol of how historical preservation could drive economic development while maintaining community character. As Chloe looked back on the chain of events that had begun with her $300 purchase of a broken barn, she marveled at how a simple desire to find value in something others considered worthless had led to discoveries that changed historical understanding and influenced modern technology development. The skills her father had taught her about finding hidden value in broken machinery had proved applicable to much more than engines and farm equipment. The story of General Blake's hidden aircraft had become more than just an historical curiosity. It had become a reminder that the past was full of untold stories and unexploited innovations waiting for people with the curiosity and courage to seek them out. Chloe's discoveries had proved that ordinary individuals could make extraordinary contributions to human knowledge, and that the most important treasures were often hidden in the most unlikely places. 10 years after her first discovery, Chloe received what would prove to be the most significant lead of her career. The call came from Dr. Elena Vasquez, a historian at the University of Madrid, who had been researching Spanish Civil War aviation. Dr. Vasquez had uncovered references in recently declassified documents suggesting that General Blake's network had extended beyond American borders, with hidden aircraft potentially located in neutral countries that had provided safe havens for experimental technology during World War II. I found correspondence between Blake and Spanish officials from 1946, Dr. Vasquez explained during their video conference. The letters discuss shipments of agricultural equipment to remote locations in northern Spain, but the technical specifications mentioned don't match any farming machinery I've ever seen. The fuel requirements alone suggest these were aircraft engines. The Spanish connection was intriguing because it suggested Blake had been thinking globally about preserving advanced technology. Spain had remained officially neutral during World War II, making it an ideal location for storing sensitive materials without the political complications that might arise in Allied or former Axis countries. Spanish archives had only recently begun releasing wartime documents, revealing previously unknown connections between American military officials and Spanish authorities. Dr. Vasquez had identified 3 locations in the Pyrenees Mountains where unusual construction activity had occurred in the late 1940s. Local residents remembered convoys of American trucks arriving at remote mountain sites, followed by extensive excavation and construction projects that were completed under tight security. After the work was finished, the sites had been carefully concealed and left undisturbed for decades. The most promising location was a former monastery in the mountains near the French border. The monastery had been abandoned during the Spanish Civil War and subsequently purchased by a mysterious American foundation that claimed to be interested in historical preservation. Local records showed that significant renovations had been undertaken at the site, including the installation of large ventilation systems and reinforced storage areas that seemed excessive for a simple restoration project. Chloe assembled a team that included Dr. Vasquez, ground-penetrating radar specialists, and archaeologists experienced in excavating sensitive historical sites. The Spanish government, intrigued by the possibility of significant historical discoveries on their territory, provided permits and support for the investigation. The monastery's current owners, descendants of the American foundation that had purchased it, were cooperative and eager to learn what secrets their property might contain. The monastery sat on a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley that would have provided excellent concealment for clandestine operations. The building itself was a classic medieval structure with thick stone walls and a complex of underground chambers that had originally been used for storage and worship. But ground-penetrating radar quickly revealed that the underground areas were much more extensive than historical records indicated. Excavation began in the monastery's basement, where radar had detected large voids behind what appeared to be solid stone walls. The team discovered that one wall was actually a carefully constructed facade that concealed a modern steel door. Behind the door lay a tunnel that extended deep into the mountain, leading to a series of chambers that had been carved from solid rock. The first chamber contained aircraft components that were immediately recognizable as belonging to Blake's design philosophy. Swept wings, advanced jet engines, and electronic systems that bore the distinctive markings of Blake's technical documentation were carefully arranged on metal shelving that had protected them from moisture and corrosion for decades. But these components were different from anything found in the American sites, incorporating design features that suggested even more advanced development work. The second chamber held complete aircraft that took everyone's breath away. 2 sleek fighters sat side by side, their lines so futuristic they looked like they belonged in science fiction movies rather than historical museums. Technical data plates identified them as XF-95, Falcon prototypes, experimental interceptor aircraft designed for speeds approaching 800 miles per hour and altitudes exceeding, 50,000 feet. But the third chamber contained the most extraordinary discovery of all. A massive aircraft filled the entire space, its wingspan nearly touching the carved stone walls. The XB-60 Thunderbolt was a strategic bomber that dwarfed anything Blake's team had previously built, with 8 jet engines and a payload bay large enough to carry conventional or nuclear weapons across intercontinental distances. According to technical documents found with the aircraft, it was capable of flying from Europe to targets anywhere in the world and returning without refueling. Dr. Vasquez was amazed by the sophistication of the Spanish site. "This isn't just a storage facility," she told the team as they examined the aircraft. "This is a complete research and development center. Look at the workshop areas, the testing equipment, The technical libraries. Blake wasn't just hiding aircraft here, he was continuing to develop new technology. The workshop areas contained evidence that Blake's Spanish operation had been active well into the 1950s, with newer aircraft designs that incorporated lessons learned from early jet aircraft development. Some of the technical innovations found in the Spanish facility wouldn't appear in production aircraft until the 1970s, suggesting that Blake's team had been working decades ahead of mainstream aerospace development. The discovery in Spain attracted international attention that exceeded even the previous Blake finds. The existence of advanced American military technology in neutral Spanish territory raised diplomatic questions that required careful handling by both governments. Spanish officials were proud that their country had played a role in preserving important aviation history, while American authorities had to explain how classified technology had ended up in foreign hands. The technical implications were staggering. The Spanish aircraft incorporated propulsion systems, materials, and electronic technologies that were far in advance of anything previously discovered. Engineers from major aerospace companies competed for opportunities to study the designs, recognizing that Blake's innovations could influence aircraft development for decades to come. Most significantly, documents found in the Spanish facility revealed the full scope of Blake's international network. The general had established similar preservation sites in Argentina, Switzerland, and Australia, creating a global network of hidden technology that spanned continents. Each site had been carefully chosen for political stability, geographic isolation, and local cooperation from officials who shared Blake's belief in preserving technological innovation. Chloe found herself coordinating recovery efforts across 4 continents as governments and research institutions worked to locate and excavate the remaining Blake sites. Each discovery revealed new aspects of the general's vision and the extraordinary lengths to which he and his collaborators had gone to preserve advanced technology for future generations. The Argentine site, hidden in a remote estancia in Patagonia, contained experimental helicopters and vertical takeoff aircraft that were decades ahead of their time. The Swiss facility, concealed within a former World War II bunker system, held advanced radar and electronic warfare equipment that had been developed but never deployed. The Australian site, buried beneath a sheep station in the outback, contained experimental engines and propulsion systems that used principles still being researched by modern aerospace companies. The cumulative discoveries fundamentally changed understanding of mid-20th century technology development. Blake's network had preserved not just individual aircraft, but entire technological ecosystems that showed how innovation could continue even when official support was withdrawn. The sites contained thousands of technical documents, test reports, and design studies that provided unprecedented insight into advanced aviation development during the crucial years following World War II. Universities around the world established research programs dedicated to studying Blake's technology and its implications for modern aircraft development. The Blake Institute for Advanced Aerospace Studies was founded as an international organization dedicated to ensuring that future technological innovations would be preserved and shared rather than suppressed or lost to political decisions. Chloe was invited to serve as the Institute's first director, a position that would allow her to continue the work she had begun in that Nebraska barn, while ensuring that Blake's vision of technological preservation would continue. The Institute established research centers at each of the major Blake discovery sites, creating a network of facilities dedicated to studying hidden innovation and preventing future losses of technological knowledge. The Institute's work extended beyond Blake's aircraft to encompass all forms of concealed or lost technology. Teams of researchers investigated reports of hidden inventions, suppressed patents, and classified research programs that might contain valuable innovations. The goal was to create a comprehensive understanding of human technological development that went beyond official histories to include the full range of human creativity and innovation. As Chloe stood in the Spanish monastery that had become one of the Institute's most important research centers, she reflected on how far she had traveled from the small-town mechanic who had bought a broken barn for $300. The journey had taken her around the world and revealed secrets that had changed historical understanding of human technological achievement. But perhaps most importantly, The Blake discoveries had demonstrated that innovation was more resilient and more widespread than anyone had imagined. Brilliant minds working in secret laboratories, hidden workshops, and concealed facilities had continued pushing the boundaries of what was possible even when their work was officially discouraged or forbidden. Their persistence had ensured that valuable knowledge survived for future generations to discover and build upon. The legacy of General Blake and the network of innovators he had assembled would continue inspiring future generations of engineers, scientists, and inventors. Their story proved that technological progress could not be permanently suppressed, and that human creativity would always find ways to preserve and advance knowledge regardless of political obstacles. Chloe's transformation from small-town mechanic to international expert in hidden technology had been extraordinary, but the real triumph belonged to all the anonymous innovators whose work had been preserved in Blake's hidden facilities. Their dedication to advancing human knowledge, even in the face of official indifference or opposition, had ensured that their contributions would eventually be recognized and valued. The barn in Nebraska where it all began had become a shrine to the power of curiosity and persistence. Visitors from around the world came to see where one young woman's determination to find value in something others considered worthless had led to discoveries that changed understanding of human technological law. Achievement. The $300 investment had yielded returns that could never be calculated in monetary terms, but whose value to human knowledge would continue growing for generations to come.